If you've just joined us, we'll get started in just a few seconds. We want to give the room just a few extra moments to fill. We want you to take a moment to look at the screen in front of you. That really describes sort of the features for the webinar today. So take a moment to get familiar with your Q&A feature, with the chat feature, and the rest of the Zoom room options that you have. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I know we still have people that are joining, but we've got a lot of great content to cover today. My name is Kelsey Schmitz. I'm going to do a few housekeeping slides, and then I'm going to hand it off to our presenter today, Dr. Kathleen Lane, who we're very happy to have joining us. So again, I'm Kelsey Schmitz, and I work for the University of Washington at the School Mental Health Assessment Research and Training Center, or the SMART Center, as the School Mental Health Lead to the Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. Our center is located in Seattle. Whether you're joining us and you're returning to school 100% virtually or hybrid or in person, we think you'll find today's session relevant to your situation. Over the last few months, the topic of screening has been one that people from across the 4 states have inquired about through our center. And we're very fortunate to have Dr. Lane with us today. And after a couple more things, I will tell you a little bit more about her and hand the rest of the session off to her. You will all be muted and your videos are off for our time together, but you can use the Q&A feature to ask us anything about the webinar, or other supports and resources, or any technical problems you might run into. The session is being recorded and will be posted within a week or so. The link to the page where you can find the recording will be in the chat. You should have received a reminder email today with a link to the presentation. If you didn't get that, we'll be providing that in the chat box now. Again, this presentation is being funded by a grant, which I want to tell you a little bit more about. Our funder, SAMHSA, asked that we provide this disclaimer that the views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, and policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Kathleen, can you go back, I think, 3 slides to our land acknowledgement slide? The University of Washington SMART Center and the Northwest MHTTC acknowledge that we live, learn, and work on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people who walked here before us and those who still walk here. We're grateful to respectfully live and work as guests on these lands with the Coast Salish and Native people who called us home. And we encourage you to learn about the ancestral lands that you are joining us from. The Mental Health Technology Transfer Center was funded by SAMHSA in 2018. It includes 10 regional centers, a National American Indian and Alaska Native Center, a National Hispanic and Latino Center, and a network coordinating office. We know that most of you are joining us from outside of our region, and we want to make sure that you know about the MHTTC Regional Center where you're located. You can visit the MHTTC network to find a center near you or check out the other centers across the nation. So our Northwest MHTTC School Mental Health team supports the school mental health workforce in Alaska, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. This is how you get in touch with our Region 10 Center. You can see our website, our email and newsletter link, as well as social media accounts for a variety of ways that you can connect with us. And my colleague, Megan Lucy, is posting links in the chat box for you. So once again, here are the Zoom features for today. We have made every attempt to ensure the security of the presentation. If there's a need to unexpectedly end, we'll follow up with the contact information you provided when you registered. Again, this meeting is being recorded. You're all muted and your videos are off for our time together. The chat feature today only includes the ability to chat to panelists, but not to other participants. If you have a question for Dr. Lane, we'd ask that you please use the Q&A feature. We know that some of you submitted questions ahead of time. We will try to cover some of those questions, but we know we won't get to every question. If you have a technology issue, please use the chat box and let us know. We have team members monitoring the Q&A pod, and they'll be sure that the facilitators receive your questions. But again, we may not be able to get to all the questions. So we need to make sure that at the end of our session, you take the time to navigate to our evaluation. We're required to do an event evaluation by our funder, and we use this feedback to inform, refine, and enhance our future events. So we would really appreciate you just taking a few moments to give us your feedback. So at this point, I want to introduce our presenter. Dr. Kathleen Lane is a professor in the Department of Special Education at the University of Kansas and an Associate Vice Chancellor for Research. Dr. Lane's research interests include designing, implementing, and evaluating comprehensive, integrated, three-tiered models of prevention to prevent the development of learning and behavioral challenges and respond to existing instances with an emphasis on systematic screening. She is currently the president-elect of the Council for Exceptional Children Division of Research. She's the co-editor of Remedial and Special Education and Journal of Positive Behavioral Interventions. Dr. Lane has co-authored 11 books and published over 200 refereed journal articles and 40 book chapters. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Wendy Oakes from Arizona State University, who's joining us behind the scenes to help us with Q&A. And I'm very happy to have both of you here with us. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelsey. Can everybody hear me okay? If you want to give me a thumbs up, if you can, or the panelists. Yep. Terrific. Thank you so much. And I want to extend a sincere thanks to Kelsey. Wendy and I have had the luxury of working with Kelsey for a number of years when she was here in Kansas, and we've appreciated the continued partnership with her since she went to the state of Washington. And I also want to acknowledge that I'm seeing several people on the call that Wendy and I have had the opportunity to work with in various research projects and professional learning activities. So thank you all for the time to join in today. So the content that Wendy and I have prepared for today is all about systematic screening in the COVID era. And as we get started, I want to show you just a couple of things. So I am putting up on this screen that I believe you can see a link to our website. This is what, when you go to it, and they'll put it in the chat, it's ci3t.org. The presentation for today, if you want it, in addition to the link that's in the chat, it's also here if you want to share it with people at a later date. If you scroll down, it'll be listed under presentations. And we wouldn't talk about screening without also talking about systems. So I want to let you know that much of the content that we're going to be presenting today, you can access. It's a free access website for your convenience. You'll find some resources related specifically to COVID to get people ready to use their tiered logic as we are supporting kids returning to school. Well, as Kelsey mentioned, that might be remote, it might be in person, it might be in a hybrid situation. And on the systematic screening page, I want to make you aware that we also have on-demand resources for you to use following today regarding systematic screening. You'll find an infographic if you wanted just something quick to share with people. We also have, in addition to the recording that will be made available for today, we have 3-minute videos, a short 23-minute video, and a longer version. So I just want you to know this is there. And some of you have been on our website before as we're talking about screening. It has a new look and feel to get ready for the school year, including updated coaching protocols for those of you using the student risk screening scale for internalizing and externalizing behavior. And if you're brand new to screening, this would be a really good place to start. There are many videos that are short that you can listen to. And as Kelsey mentioned, Wendy and I will not be able to get to all the questions today, but much of what you have asked for is there, and we'll weave in some of that as we get started. So we're looking forward to this time together. And again, our thanks to Kelsey. So if you have any questions as you're getting into that website, please do feel free to contact us. We'll put up our emails at the end, but just so you have them now, it's kathleen.lane@ku.edu. And Wendy will also put her email in the chat from Arizona State University. So the resources, as I mentioned, we're going to pull from a lot of information that is currently available on our page that was specifically built starting in March to be able to move forward with systematic screening. And we are very thankful to our funder, the Institute of Education Sciences. We are currently in the process of installing 2 large grants. One is called Project Enhance, and it's all about using comprehensive, integrated, 3-tiered models of prevention that we're going to talk about today that weave together in not only academics and PBIS for behavior, but also have an explicit commitment to social and emotional well-being for students. And fortunately, that comes at a really good time right now. We will be developing many on-demand resources, so please continue to check back. And we also have a project called Project Screen, where we're actually in the process of continuing to provide additional evidence about how a free access screening tool works today. And I'll give you some examples as we get started. So as we think about screening right now, I know some of you have been in schools and in districts where you've been screening for a very long time. And some of you on this webinar are brand new to screening. And wherever you are, please know that you're welcome. And it is a journey. And the reason why we're talking about systems in front of screening is one and very important takeaway that Wendy and I have been talking about for years is that it's very, very important to make sure that you have clarity about what is offered for students in your building for all, for some, and for a few before you start screening. So we applaud people's commitment, but we want to make sure that there is a clear path forward on how to work with the information that you garner so that we can provide meaningful, effective, evidence-based practices that are feasible so that families and teachers can move forward into meeting kids' multiple needs. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the system perspective, and we're going to talk about what it could look like, because we're all in a brand new situation for next year, knowing that it also could change. So I know some districts are planning to start like the first 6 to 8 weeks remotely. Some are planning on offering families choices as to how it's going to be. Some have asked families for commitment. Some people are ripping off the Band-Aid and sending all the kids back. And whatever your context, we just want to make sure that you've thought through the details of what that structure is going to look like next year for the adults in your building, for your students, and then ultimately for your families. So in our conversation about screening today, we're going to talk about the context that you'll be working in, and then we're going to talk about 3 different ways to use those screening data to inform instruction. We're going to talk about what to do at Tier 1. We're going to talk about how teachers can use that information to actually use effective low-intensity supports to help increase engagement and minimize disruption, whether it's in person or in remote learning environments. And we'll talk about how to use screening data to connect students to support. And many of the themes that are going to be woven through are going to be practical guidance about screening in this COVID era. And then we'll wrap up with some plans to think about what it's going to look like for you in the time ahead. So if you have access to your personal calendar right now, go ahead and open it up, and also open up a blank Word document if you would, or an old school paper pencil. We just want to make sure that you, as you're thinking about things today, I want you to be thinking about practical applications for what you can take back and use. And we're going to put some feet to those words by actually calendaring some time together at the end for you to think about what you want to do with the information that you've gleaned. So let's everybody take a deep breath and let's talk about systematic screening. So first and foremost, I want to thank you for your time. I know time is at a premium, and I know people are feeling like they're growing old on Zoom calls today. And I'm thankful for this technology because it is truly allowing us to connect with a larger group of people and in really personal and meaningful ways. So thank you very much for taking your time to be here. And as we think about what we're about to do in the year ahead, I want to take a look at the past. If you were to have taken a picture last year of all kids in the United States of America from kindergarten to high school, you would have found in that picture that there's actually a substantial number of kids that struggle with behavioral challenges, things like internalizing issues, being shy, being anxious, being socially withdrawn, as well as acting out issues like being non-compliant, confrontational, and very aggressive. And while many people think that, that kids with behavior challenges would be supported in special education, that is 100% not accurate. When you look at point prevalence estimates in that picture in the United States, you would find that about 12% of all school-age youth have moderate to severe behavior challenges. And in that same picture, you would find that about 20% of school-age students have mild to severe issues. And when you think about that, coupled with the fact that less than 1% of school-age kids go on to receive special education supports for emotional disturbances under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, that makes us pause to realize that the vast majority of kids with behavior challenges are going to be supported by our general education teachers. And in the wake of everything that's been happening with this COVID-19 pandemic, the experts are suggesting that these prevalence estimates are going to increase, which is not surprising. I think as we start back the school year, nobody is going to be untouched. And even those of us on this call, the adults on this call, we have all lost people that we love. There are people that we can't reach safely to be able to spend time together. And there's this sense of angst with the unknown. And I think the world is doing an incredible job. The CDC is posting information. I am continually impressed and grateful for the commitment from educators all across the country. And I think one good thing that has come out of this entire situation is that the world has pivoted immediately to making sure that we are prepared to meet people where they are when they come back in the school system. You know, several years ago, there used to be conversations about, you know, is addressing social and emotional well-being something that we should be doing in schools? And that's not the question anymore. It's not the question of should we, it's how should we? And so one of the benefits of the work that you are all doing in terms of systematic screening and tiered systems is that we're all on the same page right now. As we pivoted immediately to get kids out of school to keep them safe, last year it was like flipping a switch in March. So everybody basically went home and people were trying to figure out how to do it. And on our website, you'll find things like guides for families about how to build schedules, how to set expectation matrices so that we can help kids have positive, productive, and safe environments for continuing to learn at home. And now we're doing this great problem solving on bringing students back. And a piece of that is going to be making sure that we have the information that we need to inform their instructional experience for next year. So I am thankful for the fact that we have a commitment to a tiered system approach. And I am thankful for the fact that people on this call are committed to the idea of systematically looking for kids that might need more than Tier 1 has to offer. We're going to begin right now by talking about one type of integrated model. And that particular model is a comprehensive, integrated 3-tiered model. And I know I'm watching the attendees listed, and it's wonderful to see so many names of people that I've had a chance to meet in the past. It's nice to see you again. And when we think about this system, whether it's this system that you have installed or another, the idea being we want to make sure that we remember we have a system in place. And now the question is, how do we use those structures of our system to support kids as they're coming back next year? And when we think about a CI3T system, I want to explain a little bit about some of the distinctions of it. You'll notice at the base of that triangle is academic, behavior, and social components. So it is very similar to a traditional MTSS approach that addresses academic with behavior, which is the core of the model, PBIS, following the same guidelines as the National Center. But it's broader than MTSS. It's broadened to also address social and emotional well-being. And as part of the building a base of CI3T, there's actually explicit instruction using validated resources to make sure that we're giving kids explicit instruction on how to do things like to be self-aware, how to self-regulate, how to problem solve, how to make decisions, how to pick up when things don't go well. So when we think about the content that we're going to cover today, I want to be very clear. It's not just from me and Wendy. It's been influenced by a number of wonderful educational partners. We've actually been working on CI3T since 1996. And we've had the opportunity to partner literally from coast to coast. Some of these lessons were initially learned in California and Arizona and Tennessee and North Carolina and here in Kansas. And through the years, we've had wonderful people like Kelsey and others that we've had the opportunity to work with who've gone on to continue designing, installing, testing, and refining. But the simplicity of the model has been what has gleaned people's attention. Because oftentimes what you may have noticed either in your school or in your district that you're working with, that sometimes historically there had been separate teams. So there might have been like a well-intended team that was looking at academic data to see what kids needed in terms of tier 2 or tier 3 supports for instruction, primarily reading. And then oftentimes at school, there was another team that was looking at office discipline referral data, trying to make decisions about, in quote, behavior. For me, behavior is everything. It's like, it's your social interactions, it's how your oral reading fluency. But in this group, it was like looking at discipline data. And yet another group of people on a team who were committed to supporting kids' mental health needs. And now in a CI3T model, that is one integrated team where they're looking at multiple sources of data together to make decisions on what might be beneficial for the student and for the system as a whole. So when we think about CI3T, the base of it, I want you to imagine that this is possible, because we've literally worked with schools coast to coast to help them design, implement, and evaluated it. And we have done studies of systematic screening, of tier 2 supports, of tier 3 supports, of professional learning throughout. And we've learned wonderful lessons, like teachers' own emotional well-being is stronger than the national average in terms of like higher sense of self-efficacy, lower rates of burnout when done well. And Scott Ross has found similar things with PBIS. But when we think about heading back to school next year, part of it is having clarity on what that tier 1 experience is going to be in your school system when you come back. And so we encourage you to reflect on what was and make a new plan for what is based on your current instructional plans. And I think the name of the game for this coming year is going to be structured flexibility. We're going to want to make sure that we think carefully about what the experience is going to be instructionally. But remember, we can't bucket this into separate silos. We really now more than ever need to be prepared to welcome kids back to safe, positive, productive, and clear and kind routines. So when we think about next year coming back, one of the things that you will find on the CI3T website, and I'm going to bring that up again for you in just a moment because I want you to know where this is. We have actually drafted exemplars. If you click on responding to COVID and you scroll down and pick an example of either elementary or middle or high, I'm going to click on middle school just for illustration. When this comes up, you're going to have a full exemplar, and thanks so much for putting that link in the chat. And you're going to notice that there are some gray sections of this. Prior to COVID, you would have seen a document that looks very much like this. It's like a CI3T implementation manual that was only designed for in-person instruction. And now what we've done is we have these gray sections to describe what students will need to know to be successful academically, behaviorally, and socially. So this is their roles and responsibilities when they come back in person. This is what remote instruction is going to look like in those 3 domains. And what we're going to talk about right now for faculty and staff, just like in years past, you've had clarity on what the tier 1 experiences is for adults. We now have to start this year by being clear for adults first, because remember, in any tiered system, you're changing the student experience by first changing the adult experience. So I want you to know these exemplars are here, and I'm going to go on to show you components of a CI3T blueprint, but I'm going to encourage you to rest here on these exemplars so that you can connect back to these at a later date. So when we think at that whole experience of like what tier 1 is going to look like, how we're going to meet kids' academic needs, how we're going to meet their behavioral needs, how we're going to make sure that we have dedicated time to continuing the good learning that you had already been doing at tier 1. And if it wasn't in place, now is the time to think about what that validated resource is going to be. So for example, once that's all set, we need to think about what is instruction going to look like in person? What is it going to look like in terms of virtual context? And even thinking about things like when we get into the idea of setting expectations, last spring when kids went home, many of you probably already had expectation matrices in your classrooms. And now we need to think, if you're bringing kids back, what else needs to be added there? So I want to think about things like having clear expectations about like how to wear a mask in your building, that it covers from here to here. It's your nose and your mouth. It's not like something that hangs off your ear, or you might have been shopping places and you've seen people not wearing them appropriately. We want those clear expectations taught, practiced, and acknowledged using the same acknowledgement system that you've used in the past. We also want to make sure that things like expectations around social distancing to keep kids safe in the hallways, in the restrooms, in non-instructional areas are in place. And on our website, we even have guidance on how you can build expectation matrices strictly for virtual environments. And when we think about what you want it to look like in terms of your expectations for remote instruction, we're going to do that the same way we would have when we're looking at providing explicit instruction in a face-to-face environment. When you look at an example in that exemplar that you may have opened up, this might be what an expectation matrix might look like for the coming year, with guidance about wearing your mask and social distancing. And then you'll also see an exemplar for how you might design an expectation matrix for remote instruction. So, and that may look like it's formatted incorrectly, and it's not. It's intended for you to actually use it as a Zoom background. Put your logo on it, make it pretty, but you're going to actually want to have a space where the expectations could be here, and you're going to have your beautiful face in front of instruction so that you can see kids' eyes and they can see yours. So when we think about that explicit instruction, that does not go away. We're going to use that same approach, positive, productive, and clear. We're going to welcome kids back. We're going to need to be really clear with empathy. We've all been through some tough times, and I'm hoping that the world will be kinder, a little kinder, more kind, and a little gentler as kids come back. Another thing that I want you to really think about is, how did you leave last year in terms of soft skills? Were you already in a school where you had a commitment to using a validated resource? And do you have something like second step? Do you have positive action or connect with kids? But just like in years past, where you have an explicit instructional schedule for how that is going to be taught in person, we're going to want to have the same clarity at Tier 1 when kids come back. And my strong encouragement is, don't change curriculum now. Remember, you started teaching kids these soft skills, things like how to self-regulate, how to advocate for themselves, how to make their assistance needs known. In some curriculums, like Positive Action, even has an entire unit on healthy bodies and healthy minds, and the importance of good physical safety and as it relates to your emotional well-being. We want to thread those same lessons through. I had a wonderful opportunity to talk with one of our district partners who's a part of Project Enhance. And this assistant superintendent was saying that for her, it was like she felt bombarded initially by all these well-intended resources coming in from companies and things. And then she's like, it was so helpful that they already had a district master plan for CI3T, so that when all these things started coming in, her response back was, we've already made this commitment to this particular curriculum. They use second step. And so what she focused on is making sure that teachers were prepared to continue that instruction from a virtual environment. And then she worked with the company to make sure that families also knew those skills taught so that they could practice and use those at home. When we talk about building a CI3T model, we know it takes time to do that. We actually have a fully manualized approach to doing it, and some people that are in attendees are seeing this as familiar. And Kelsey, thanks for the positive encouragement in the chat. That's nice to hear that people are finding this useful. We do want to take time to actually plan out what that whole experience is going to look like for next year and in the years ahead, what's going to be for all, for some, and for a few. And as you think about the important work that you're doing right now with equity, remember, part of your equity work is making sure that there is good representation of the community that you serve when you go through this building process. So typically a CI3T leadership team at a building would be the principal, 2 general education teachers, a special education teacher. It would be another person that could help with tiered systems, and there would be a parent. There would be a parent member that also has a child at that school. And our encouragement is to make sure you have a child on that team that is at least 8 years old. And it's not that the child would come to every one of those days of planning that you're looking at now, but the students meet together and they give input on, what are things that are valuable to them in terms of reinforcement, like what do they like to access? What do they like to avoid? Because who knows better about what's reinforcing to kids than the kids themselves. We also ask students for information on where would you go if you needed extra help on something, because we want to learn from the student perspective what's available. And that family member is really important because you want to make sure that you are building a blueprint. It's essentially like a constitution for your school that takes into account multiple people's perspective. For example, the idea of teaching expectations. There's been a lot of talk recently about how do we know those expectations are really representative from the school as a whole. In a CI3T model, part of that building process for establishing expectations, like those ones that we would have projected here, there's actually a survey tool on the Measures tab, and it's the School-Wide Expectation Survey for specific settings. And that tool is actually emailed out to all faculty and staff in the building. And by all, I mean all, like custodians, cafeteria workers, paraprofessionals, as well as administrators and office staff and teachers. And on that tool, they're given a whole list of items that were common items from other expectation matrices from 15 years ago. And people rate the extent to which that skill is critical for a child's success. So rather than those matrices being built by like 5 or 6 or 7 well-intended people in the building, it actually gets input from all adults in the building. And the science behind that is you're trying to glean information from all the adults in the building to find out what do they prioritize. And then expectation matrices are actually built using items rated by the majority of adults as critical for success, because we want to teach kids skill sets that are likely to be acknowledged as positive and constructive by the adults in the building. And when we think about it under normal circumstances, we know this takes time. And one of the things that we've learned in this building process, there's actually this iterative feedback loop. So teams come to these sessions that are in blue, but afterwards, after each session, the team goes back and communicates with the full faculty and staff. So another distinguishing feature of CI3T, in addition to it including social and emotional well-being at Tier 1, it's also a data-informed build. So a data-informed build to the expectation matrix, and social validity is assessed at the base. And one thing that we've learned is, like, when you're building that integrated tiered model, we have learned that what your full faculty and staff think of it in terms of the goals, the procedures, and the outcomes, we know that your school's mean on that survey, and that's called the primary intervention rating scale. And Wendy, if you don't mind jumping that in the chat, that would be helpful. It's the primary intervention rating scale that once your model is built, when teams fill that out, have their faculty and staff fill it out, that school's mean score actually predicts how well you'll implement the next year. And that's important. So when we start thinking about green being a building year and then blue being your first 2 years of initial implementation, we know that what people believe about the plan influences how well it's going to go. And that's important, because if, as somebody on this call that's trying to affect a change at Tier 1, including systematic screening, we want to have a clear path for knowing how to support implementation, because it has to be more than a good idea on a piece of paper. It has to be implementable. So at the end of that training series, and these are examples from some of our partner districts, share with permission, here's an example of what would be on the inside of a CI3T manual. In the beginning, it's a blank blueprint, and through the training process, people come together, and through a systematic approach, they define what are the roles and responsibilities for students, like what do kids need to know in the areas of academics and PBIS and in terms of social and emotional well-being. And as I just showed you, we're going to give some consideration to what it's going to look like in continuous learning. And some of the explicit pieces that are going to need some attention for next year is, in years past, it might have been, you have components related to the National Association for Reading, and you might have had, an expectation of 135 minutes of reading instruction per day. That will probably not be on deck for next year. So what do you want it to be? In almost every single CI3T blueprint, there's a commitment to the use of very practical, research-based strategies to increase engagement. And right now, we're going to want to make sure, especially in digital environments, we're giving great care to putting practical tools in teachers' hands to increase engagement and minimize disruption. And I beg you, listen to the advice that I know you've heard from, George Sagai for many years. Do not exclude a kid from class, particularly right now. If you exclude a kid and ask them to log off Zoom, the probability of you getting that child back is slim to none. So let's focus on putting these very practical, positive, evidence-based practices in the hands of teachers. Things like, how do I do behavior-specific praise in a remote environment? How do I build in instructional choices into the day? How do I engage in active supervision when I'm using breakout rooms with kids? So we want to think about what that's going to look like for next year. And in addition to teaching expectations, we still want to have a plan for responding to challenging behaviors. And I know Kelsey herself has led many, many different wonderful trainings on how to manage acting out behavior using the guidance provided by Jeff Colvin and Terry Scott about the importance of not just intervening when a kid's really escalated, but how to prevent that from actually ever happening in an environment, and realizing that many kids are going to come back pretty emotionally fragile. And we already know that even before this happened, we had about 20% of school-age kids who already were struggling with emotional and behavior challenges. We need to be prepared for that. And so one word I would love you to keep track of is the word empathy. If you could start the year by teaching one soft skill to every child, it's empathy. When somebody is acting a certain way, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's think about why they could be acting that way. And so in our responding to challenging behavior, we want to make sure that we keep instruction moving forward, that we show empathy to the learner that's like the wheels have fallen off the bus and they're having a hard time. And again, that's Jeff Colvin. It's Geoff. And Colvin is Colvin. And then Terry Scott. And I will include some readings here in just a couple minutes that you can circle back on. Another important thing as we look ahead to next year is we encourage you, just like you plan out academic instruction, please plan out the instruction for soft skills. So in other words, what is it going to look like in your digital environment when you are teaching these soft skills? So I would literally take the time to build an instructional schedule to say, this is what it's going to look like. It might be, and use the technical manual that comes with the resource that you've invested in. Is it 10-minute or 15-minute lessons? Is it a lesson a month? Is that going to be taught, it's going to ideally be taught with the teacher, but a clarity with other people like social workers, school psychologists, and the people that are going to be providing more targeted support for kids that need more than Tier 1 has to offer. But we want clarity on that whole thing. That is what we are going to teach at the base. So when we talk about integration, it's not just teach your social skills lesson, cross it off the list, and go on for the day. It's not just a PBS isn't going to be a poster on a wall and then you go on for the day. We are actually going to weave those in together into the fabric of your instruction. And then we're going to remember that reinforcement piece is you've defined what's expected, and now you're going to give kids the opportunity to practice and be recognized for meeting expectations. Positive, safe, productive. And then this is where the screening piece comes in. We need to know a couple things in addition to screening. We need to know, is Tier 1 happening? We need to know what people think about it, and then we need to know how it's working. The is it happening piece is your treatment fidelity. So we strongly encourage you. People have been asking us, should we continue to do the tiered fidelity inventory next year? And the answer is absolutely, because we need to know where we need to continue to grow. And then I would also add on that commitment to assessing social validity. Where do people need input on either the goals, the procedures, or the outcomes? We want to know from their view, how is this working so that we can adjust? Wendy and Mark Buckman and Katie Lane and I have been able to build, under Wendy's leadership, this idea of an integrated lesson plan. And this is also available on our website. And it's not that you need to write a formal lesson plan every time you engage in a Zoom thing, but be thinking about, what do I need to alert students to? What are my objectives academically? What soft skill might there be an opportunity to practice? Like if you were starting the year with empathy, how could you connect that into a story or to a piece of literature that you're using, or to has kids draw on previous experience? And then I'm going to use that expectation matrix to pre-correct for what I'm looking for in this environment. And all these strategies up here, like pre-correction, I'm reminding kids of what I'm looking for before they get started. I'm being very clear on the expectation. So when a kid logs into a Zoom call, I want to say, thank you so much for being on time. I'm super excited about our time together. I'm glad, and when we build in choices, what is that going to look like? And so as we're weaving this all together, we want to make sure that we are weaving through the use of those strategies throughout all of instruction. And we're going to need to get creative with this. And I'm super thankful for our team to be able to continue the work that we're doing as funded by IES. We are actually learning right now with people about what that looks like. On this screen are examples from some acknowledgements that one principal leader on a CI3T team has been doing with her faculty and staff. We have these virtual postcards on our website. She's been filling those out. She's also been sending them electronically with a very short 30-second video to say specifically what she is saying and writing in that card. But we want to make sure to know that whether we're in person, and this is hard, I get it. It's not the same as, you know, being in the room with people. And I'm a hugger, and I'm sure those days are over for a very long time. But we want to think about what could acknowledgements look like in this digital environment. And we're going to get creative with that. We're also going to think carefully about how to acknowledge kids. One piece of advice we have, and there's really nice briefs on pbis.org, which is the National Center for Positive Behavior Intervention and Support, about bringing kids back in the school year. But think carefully about whatever is your system. We don't want to change systems in a digital environment. So if your language is tickets, stay with tickets. And we want to think about how to, you know, create exchange systems. These are an example that was adapted with permission from one of our district partners. And you can see they're creative. It might be that 30 virtual tickets could be traded in to do a quick exercise thing with a teacher, or 25 to go on a virtual class field trip, or 10 might be to read aloud to the class. It also could be really important right now more than ever with the unemployment rate over 41 million. Think about what are all the acknowledgements, the reinforcers that are free access. And remember, kids want to access some things and they want to avoid some things. So think about what kids want to access in terms of attention or time with others, or tangible things to play with. It could be things in their own home, or it might be a sensory experience, like listening to music. So we want to think carefully about building this whole platform before we even start thinking about screening. Because if we do not want to screen without a clear plan for responding. And the first response is tier 1. And we're going to talk now very shortly about how we're going to use these data to connect kids to supports. But again, have a system, have a clear base, take the time to get input from the adults, explicitly teach it to the adults so they know what they're accountable for in this digital environment. And we have to remember self-care is going to be very important for the educators as well. So we have to think about what is evidence-based, what is feasible and reasonable to do. And whatever it is, we're going to get input on it next year with social validity. We're going to find out if it's happening with our fidelity data, and then we need to know accurately who needs more than tier 1 has to offer. And when we think about next step, please remember that there still has to be a plan for non-responsiveness. So in other words, what do I do when a child needs more than tier 1 has to offer? And in a CI3T model, we encourage you to actually make a master list of everything that is available in your school that is not for everybody. These moderate intensity things are going to be at tier 2. And remember, it doesn't have to be like a go to a table type thing. It could be check in, check out. It could be higher rates of behavior specific praise. It could be a reading group. It could be just simply greater intensity. And we're going to think about tier 3 in that same capacity as well in terms of intensity, reserved for kids with the most intensive intervention needs. And please remember, there are no tier 2 or no tier 3 students. There are students who have tier 2 and tier 3 needs, and they fluctuate. And it's a point that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But as we get started, please remember, this is going to be a journey. Some of you are brand new to screening. Some of you have been doing this for a while. Some of you have many elements of this base that we're talking about, like with clarity on your academics. Maybe you have PBIS. Maybe you already have a validated social and emotional curriculum. And if you don't, maybe you've got pieces. I want you to think about that for just a little bit. And so right now, we are going to take a quick poll for us to find out where you are in terms of systematic screening. If you are doing it, if you're not there quite yet. And I also, while you're taking this poll for the early completers, will you take just a couple minutes and in that calendar of yours, go ahead and put one 30-minute follow-up point where you're committing to yourself to go back and check out the available resources on screening after this call on CI3T. So fill out the poll, reflect on your own time for professional learning, and go ahead and drop that into your calendar. And we're going to give people just a couple minutes to complete the poll.
Thanks, Kathleen. I know folks can't see the poll right now. I'll post it when it's done, but it looks like majority of our answers are no. Right now at 62%, that's winning the race. 21% are saying yes, and 17% are not sure.
Okay, great, thank you. And as you're thinking about whether or not you're sure if it's happening, Systematic screenings for behavior, very similar to systematic screenings for academic. They happen 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. And what we're talking about are independently completed by teachers. And I'll give you a little bit more detail in just a couple minutes. But in brief, when a screening tool is happening, it's a small set of questions asked. It requires no time with students. So it's not like Kelsey's asking me, Kathleen, are you internalizing today? Although she might. Instead, it's like there's this list of items and you complete them independently on a list of students in your class. And we're going to go through more details, but that would be happening in fall, winter, and spring. So thank you. It looks like the polling has stopped and we're going to share those results. We've got 62% of the people on this call are not yet screening in their buildings. 21% are, and 16% are unsure at this time. And so again, wherever you are is fine, but as you walk through this balance of our time together, I want you to know that if you are exploring the possibility of starting screening, and a very important first step is make sure you have clarity on your tiered system. And please make sure that whether it's a paper and pencil or a digital access to your blueprint, every adult in the building needs to know what is the plan for all, for some, and for a few. And on CI3T.org, if you want to, there's a whole tab called Building Your CI3T Model. You can download blueprints. You can immediately just start putting together what you already know is in place in your building. And there's guidance on how to do an explicit building process. And Kelsey is definitely an expert in that. So let's think about what this could look like at Tier 1. If we're thinking about the idea of screening, we're looking for an accurate way of connecting kids to supports more than Tier 1 has to offer. But I want to be really clear, when people screen the first time, it doesn't mean that every single student that screens in as at moderate risk or high risk automatically has to go to a Tier 2 or Tier 3 support. We're going to want to take some time to see what does risk look like in overall in your building. And so we want to look to see what percentage of students in the building, in the grade level, in a class are actually responding to Tier 1 efforts. So when we think about systematic screening, I'm going to show you one illustration. There are many great systematic screening tools. Some are commercially available and even come with intervention materials for use at Tier 2 and Tier 3 as well as Tier 1. And there are some free access tools. This is one such free access tool. The original 7 items were developed by Tom Drummond at a University of Oregon, and then our team has added to it psychometrically some additional items to also detect internalizing issues. So the way this works is districts pre-populate this, and there's slightly different scoring procedures for elementary, middle, and high school. And the way it works is this, like I'm going to tell you just concretely, and there's coaching protocols on the screening page, on the screening tab on the website. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's some tools that will be useful to you. But essentially what happens is that at a district level, schools each teacher has a class list that is pre-populated with student names and ID numbers, and they literally just rate across. And in the chat, Wendy has put an access point for you to look at these additional materials. And when you fill these out, they're independent. It is not a conversation. And there's other screening tools like those completed by families and the students themselves. We're talking about teacher completed screening tools. And what you're looking for, and this is really important. So everybody, if you're multitasking, stop for just a second. You are not saying a child is like a stealer or is a liar. You are looking to see, do these behaviors occur together and to a high enough degree, because the 2 scores, the one for internalizing and the one for externalizing, those total scores, that collection of behaviors, if they're to a high enough degree, that is what's predicting outcomes for students. So when you look at these risk categories, and I'm going to show you in just a minute, there is no value in unpackaging the item level data. So it's not that you're going to say, oh, Kathleen scored a 3 on steal, she needs a stealing intervention. It doesn't work like that. It is not a diagnostic. It is just a screener. It's giving you information as to whether or not that child has higher than average collection of internalizing or externalizing behaviors. So in this, these total scores, one for internalizing and one for externalizing, and note that the cut scores are different, like the scores used to put them into groups are different for middle and high school kids than they are at the elementary. Peer problems actually become more indicative of internalizing than externalizing. But this information is used to shape instruction. At the elementary level, it's the teacher, the main teacher, that does the screening. So although like specials teachers don't need to screen, they're going to need that information like the total scores to know how to support students in their classes. And at the middle and high school, you are not screening every class of every student every day. What you're doing is you're identifying one time, like one period, and then hold that constant. In some of the work that Wendy and I have done, that's often the most challenging question of like, when should we screen? At the high school, and I see some of you are in high school, and I love that we've got some social workers on the call today. At the high school level, you need to have a time when every single student's in the building, which is more complicated than you think. So it oftentimes can't be first period because some kids might take a college class, and then there'd be others like where it might not be in the building at the end of the day. So you need to find a time during the day. Like in one of the districts that we worked in, the only option for screening at the high school was fifth period. And the only reason every kid was in the building at fifth period is that's when it backed up against lunch. But we're gonna wanna have a way to make sure that in secondary schools, it's one time of day and it's stable over time. And then at the elementary level, that again, it's the classroom rater. And the question often also comes up is that, is it a problem that the rater is different at the high school level, like, or the middle school level after they change classes? Because the first screening time point for behavior screenings is 4 to 6 weeks after the school year begins. It's right before winter break. And then again, 4 to 6 weeks before the end of the year. And we know that the rater changes. And there have been studies to show that there is still statistically significant stability. So inter-rater reliability has been tested, at least for this tool. These are good questions that you're posing. So you want to make sure that you're doing exactly what you're doing, unpackaging this. And the questions that are coming up right now are exactly on point. Like, how are these screening tools going to work in the COVID era? And that's actually exactly what we're exploring right now as part of Project Screen. Because right now, these data historically are used like this. So like you look to see over time. These are real data from one elementary school to show their journey over time. So this is fall of 2014 to fall to 2018. The green base of that triangle represents the percentage of students that are in the low risk category. Yellow represents the percentage of kids in the moderate risk category. And then percentage of red is the kids in the high risk category. And you look over time and remember, in this elementary school, new kindergartners come in, then fifth graders leave, etc. So, but now you have this way, and check this out. This is just externalizing. Look at this building, look at internalizing. I'm going to go back one more time. Externalizing, internalizing. You can see in this building, when they first started implementing CI3T, they had a large percentage of kids with internalizing issues that were higher than average. So that's how they knew where to focus their tier 1 supports, because that does not mean that you should go connect all these kids to tier 2 and tier 3. That's indicative of a tier 1 issue. And remember, when we're doing these screenings, initially we use this to look at like, what is the overall scope? And then I unpackage it by grade level in the building. And I can look here, and like in this particular one, I can see just by looking at this quick summary that first grade actually has the most challenging types of externalizing issues relative to kindergarten or second grade. And I know that because of this percentage right here, that it's only 77% of the kids are in the low risk category. And this doesn't surprise me, because that's when kids have to learn how to crack the code for reading. And when they don't, oftentimes it's frustrating. That's very different than this situation. Like, look at this. These are data from a middle school that first started screening in 2004. And I'm showing you this to show you this is not a new thing. Systematic screening's been going on for a while. And in this particular middle school, you can see that over time, in general, the green bars get bigger. There was one year, I felt like it was those weight loss commercials, like in 2008, where it was super small. It was like less than 1% of kids in their building had higher than average acting out issues. And then the next year it went up. And initially they're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Well, what they did is they went back and looked at their fidelity data, and they realized that through the years, as new teachers had been onboarded, they had not done great onboarding at that time for, explaining, we're a CI3T school, this is what we do. So they added in booster sessions. But when we talk about using your screening data to shape instruction, we're talking about first, like, get a snapshot for the school as a whole, as I'm showing you now. And then this particular school was not super sold on the idea of screening. So look at this very first year. This was low, moderate, and high. So what we did at the end of this first year with this school screen, we waited all the way to the end of the year and picked up information on every single kid in the school. Like, how many office discipline referrals had they earned? How many days had they been in in-school suspension? What was their end of the year grade point average? And listen carefully to what we learned. We learned that those fall scores, and it literally takes 15 minutes to screen your entire school. So it's teachers coming together in a faculty and staff meeting. They fill it out right there. That's it. There's no time with kids. It doesn't take a lot of time. We found out that those ratings actually predicted how well kids did that year. So we learned that if the kids started off in the low risk category, that's the kids that scored in the green, by the end of the year, they earned 1.5 office discipline referrals. Kids that started off in the moderate risk, like in the yellow, by the end of the year, they earned on average 5. And then the kids that started off the year at the high risk category, by the end of the year, they earned 8. And we found similar patterns, that those same fall scores predicted how the kids did in terms of suspensions. Look at this, less than 1 day, less than a half a day, almost 2 days in on-campus suspension. And remember, that's resulting in lost instruction. And then for every middle school teacher who says, that's great, but I don't care because I have to focus on academics, and I do understand that pressure as a former teacher, but check out the grade point averages. Those fall scores also predicted grade point average. And there is, and right here, like, look at between moderate and high risk, there's no statistically significant differences in those grade point averages. They're both just lower than kids that started off the year with lower risk. And that means that any indication of risk at the beginning of the year for acting out behavior, we need to pay attention to that, because any sign of risk places the child at risk for lower grade point average. And then look at the course failures. We also learned in that same study that those fall scores predicted how many classes kids would fail by the end of the year. And so you ask yourself the question, is it worth 15 minutes at the beginning of the year to figure out who's going to fail? And I think all of us on this call would agree that absolutely it's worth it. And then questions often come up of, like, do you think that, the screening data are leading to those outcomes for kids? We know that those scores are predictive. We've also done other studies at the end of the year, so the teachers weren't influenced by the fall scores, but we learned that in a convergent validity studies, we saw similar patterns. We've also learned from many wonderful district partners, like these are data from a high school, and this high school principal, I think, just rocks. I mean, he's really, really solid, strong CI3T leadership team, and he actually shared these data with us to show us that these are internalizing issues. And if you look at the years going down, you can see that as he was implementing his CI3T model, he saw decreases in the percentage of kids at moderate and high risk for internalizing issues, and saw similar patterns for acting out. And I have to tell you, like, as a mother of 2 and as a researcher, the kids, truthfully, I'm most worried about right now are kids with internalizing issues, because, shy, anxious, withdrawn, because those behaviors are far more covert. Kids with acting out behavior, it's very easy for us to recognize those behaviors and swoop in to support kids, because those behaviors interrupt instruction. Internalizing behaviors can be happening all the time, and we may miss them. And good news is, kids with acting out behaviors, they're never sick. They're there every day. They suit up, they show up. But as we think about screening, if you did not commit to screening, you would be missing kids that have internalizing issues, because right now there's no other metric in school other than screening that would allow for it. In traditional PBIS models, office discipline referral data have been used to move kids through tiers. So it'd be like 0 to 1 suggests tier 1 needs, 2 to 5 suggests tier 2 needs, and then 6+ suggests tier 3. And that was a good starting place. But in all honesty, for those of us in the classroom, by the time a child has earned 4, 5, 6 office discipline referrals, sometimes people are feeling on the other side of constructive. So the benefits of screening is that we can find kids at the first sign of concern. We can use that information in conjunction with other data, which I'm going to show you in just a couple minutes, to connect kids to support. Now, we have to screen responsibly, and I love one of the questions that got posed or concerns is, you know, what's that going to look like in remote environments? There have been no validity or reliability studies on how screening tools function yet in this environment, and that's exactly what Wendy and I are doing as part of Project Screen. We will be partnering with some districts in the Midwest, the West, and the East Coast to exactly answer those questions. And that's why you'll see on our website now, we are encouraging anybody that's moving forward with screening next year to ask yourself 2 questions. When they fill out the screening, ask the rater to say, how did you serve this student during this screening window? Was it remote? Was it hybrid? Or was it in person? And then the second question is, was that kid a regular attender? And then engage. This is one of our recommendations for next year. Engage in partnerships like with your research and evaluation department or with another university to see how those screening tools do function in the COVID era. So, because right now we absolutely encourage you to screen, but we want you to screen with caution because we haven't experienced this before. Nobody has done systematic screening studies of just how it works in a digital environment. As somebody who's logged into Zoom every single day, and we have a virtual office that our team works with, I believe that we can see these soft symptoms. When somebody logs in, you can see if they're having a hard time. But we need to know that more than just a gut. We need to see how it functions. And if this isn't enough, we need to know that too. So when you are thinking about getting started, for the 62% of you who answered that you're not there yet, know that there's different types of screening tools. There's teacher completed, there's family completed, like the parent completes it, and there's student self-report. And at the end of this, we're going to give you some guidance on that. Right now, what we're talking about is teacher completed screening tools. They are completed 3 times a year. They require no time with kids. And again, the timing of this is that the first screening time point would happen 4 to 6 weeks after the school year begins, right before winter break, and again, 4 to 6 weeks before the end of the year. That information would get aggregated and shared just like I'm sharing with you right now. That is exactly how we would share it back with the district partner. You do not use the item level data because again, you're looking to see do those behaviors occur together and to a high enough degree. And when you're working on picking out a screening tool, there's guidance on the website that can help walk you through that. Because you need to think about, was it normed on a comparable population? And that's the benefit actually of engaging in some of this community community partnerships with your universities. Because you want to know, does this screening tool work in my environment with my students? And we want to do some unpackaging, like on Project Screen, we'll be looking at reliability and validity, and we're going to be looking, for potential bias and things like that. And you want to ask and answer all those questions to make sure that what you bring into your community is feasible and it's accurate, that it's accurately detecting the students that have the concerns that you're looking for. And I'm not trying to convince you to do this screening tool. I'm encouraging you do your due diligence, bring something in, but remember, if you screen, you have to have a plan to intervene. And your first line of defense is tier 1. It's looking to see, is this enough for this student? And on our website, there's even a table that gives you like a jumping off point to go explore other screening tools like the SABRS, like the systematic screening for behavior disorders out of University of Oregon, developed by Hill Walker. I personally think it's the gold standard in systematic screening. It also lets you find internalizing and externalizing. And there used to be a preschool version and an elementary version, and now it's one version. It goes through the beginning of the high school years. And then once that screening is installed, please remember, no tool is perfect. You will make mistakes with screening. And please listen to this. So again, if you're multitasking, pause for just a second to listen to this. When you fill out those screening tools, you're going to make some mistakes. Every tool has some has some error where you say, I screened a student in, like I might have said they scored in the yellow or in the red, when in fact they really don't have that level of need. And I want you to think about the consequence of that. What is the consequence of a false positive? That child gets a little more help. They might get a higher rate of behavior specific praise. They might get a check-in, check-out intervention. They might get a self-monitoring intervention. I'm okay with all of that, honestly. What I'm terrified about are the false negatives, overlooking a child who does need help. I don't want to be the one to say, okay, this child doesn't have any tier 2 or tier 3 needs when they actually do. So when you're looking at these technical manuals, you're going to want to make sure that you check the false positive and the false negative rate. So false positive, screening a child in and get them extra support when they don't actually need it. To me, that's the less serious issue in this type of a situation. Because remember, screening data should not be used to exclude a child. It shouldn't be like, you've been screened in and you're not going to go on this field trip. That's not what this is about. We're using it to shape instruction. And I'm going to show you those illustrations right now. So when we think about the first step, when you've screened the first time, and these are data from an actual school on the East Coast, and when we look at these, I remember this person calling and saying, okay, we need some help at tier 2. These data actually suggest to me that the challenge is at tier 1. When you have that many kids requiring tier 2, just like in reading instruction, that's a tier 1 indication. And in this particular school, this is a great jumping off point for this principal, because there was nothing consistently required in that district for reading or for math or PBIS. It was like every teacher had choice on how they wanted to manage those things. And that was a clear indication that wasn't working. That's a very different picture than this particular building that I showed you, where it looks like tier 1 practices, when implemented with fidelity, have really seen the desired shift in behavior. So the first thing we're going to do is think about tier 1 efforts for the whole. And then here's something that I'd like you to hold on to. In many tiered systems, they go right away from, okay, let's look at tier 1 and then start putting kids into tier 2 and tier 3. In a CI3T model, we're going to encourage you to first think about looking at multiple sources of data together to make some decisions about shifts in teacher behavior. For example, and these are fictitious kids' names. So these are not real students. But imagine this is your class. And some of the districts we work with, they literally have now edited their system so a teacher can say, like, maybe I'm a high school teacher and I can open at 5th period and say, show me what their reading score is and show me what their math score is. Let's pretend like these are data from like a 5th grade class. So here's reading, math, externalizing, internalizing, office discipline referral, and attendance. And please remember, check your attendance, because school is a must be present to win game. We do not want to say a child needs more than tier 1 if they're not even showing up to get tier 1. And the reason I keep saying is don't look at things so narrowly, like just looking at your screening data, look at the whole thing. Because I need that to do my best decision making. Like, look at this child, like OTAM. So like, look at this child across. If I was only looking at behavior screening data, I might see that this kid has tier 2 needs for acting out and for internalizing. But I also need to know this kid is it's challenging that this kid isn't at school regularly. So that I have to build in as part of an intervention to get the child to school. And I also need to know that kid's really struggling academically. Look at the last kid in that row. That kid has high externalizing, high internalizing, very much in need of extra support in math and reading, etc. And good news, kid shows up all the time. I need that whole set of information, because like when you think about it, when I show up at your school, like if I was a student in your school, you might be like, oh, that's Kathleen Lane, and she's kind of one hot mess. She has tier 1 needs for reading, but she's got tier 2 needs for written expression, and she has tier 3 needs for her internalizing issues, and tier 2. So it's fluid. And so we have to be able to look at multiple sources of data, because if I only looked at reading or if I only looked at behavior, I might make very different decisions. So one of the first things that we would encourage people to do is look at your data like this. If this was your legit data, you do not start by putting every child into a tier 2 or tier 3. I start to ask myself the question, what is the simplest shift I can make in my instruction to increase engagement, minimize disruption, so that I can move forward with instruction? So I would actually adopt some of these research-based strategies. And on the website, there's a whole series. If you go to the professional learning tab, there's a whole series of drop-down menu. These materials are all built for you. We have some districts that teach these. Like one of the partners that we have in the Midwest, they teach one strategy a semester. Another district partner we have, they do a strategy a month. Some people have this whole menu where you can go to an hour, you can go to half day, you can go to a 10 minutes, you can do a web-based thing. Kind of exciting. But it looks like this. So if you go to the professional learning tab, you'll see that there's some free access professional learnings for some specific topics. And then there's this whole on-demand set of resources. Like if I wanted to learn how to do active supervision or behavior-specific praise as a teacher, and you've heard, you know, George Takei and Rob Horner say this many times, like, you don't have to do a million things. You just have to do things with enough evidence behind them to suggest, if I do this with fidelity, it's going to work. So pick one small change, like, and if it were me, I would target like making sure that people know what they're doing with behavior-specific praise. Know that your behavior, you're giving kids feedback on things that are malleable factors, things that kids can control. Don't praise somebody for being smart. Praise somebody for, you know, showing up on time, for being diligent, for giving their own effort, for those types of things. Because if you can acknowledge for kids, like, I want you to do these things, like the things in your expectation matrix, if they do those things more often, it's going to help them access instruction. I could also focus on things like choice. Now, when you click on any of these, you're going to find this whole little suite of professional learning materials. There's a group in New York. They do such a great job with this. They brought in everybody that does, it's like all their instructional coaches. They train them on all these low intensity supports, and they use these, they literally use exactly these. There's an implementation checklist, like these 7 steps on how to do it. There's a fidelity sheet to help teachers get it in place. There's a little video explaining what it is. And now when they go out and do professional learning, everybody's getting access to the same information, because sometimes people are working too hard. Like, you've got like teachers each making their own self-monitoring sheet or each doing their own version. It makes it hard for families to know what's going on because it's not consistent. And if we could cut out the legwork for the teacher, just let them focus on the strategy, be consistent, then you're going to program for generalization of use of that strategy. So check those out. Now let's back up. I've got my base. I teach my base. I've looked at my screening data. I've made some simple adjustments to my instruction to increase engagement and minimize disruption. Now, the next way I'm going to use my data are going to be to connect kids to tier 2 supports. And when we think about tier 2 supports, what Wendy and I do when we work with people is we help them to start by just building a master list of what's everything that's in your building that is not for somebody. And then we help them to think about intensity. Is it like a tier 3? Is it a tier 2? And we encourage them to weed out things that you're doing because of history, not because they work. And when you think about tier 2, back in the day when tiered systems were first brought in by Hill Walker from the mental health industry and introduced into education, a lot of times it was communicated as small group or individual. It's just intensity as the current conceptualization. So it doesn't have to be small group. And I want you to think about it in terms of intensity. So I'm just going to tell you a story. So I mentioned that I'm a mother of 2. I have a 24-year-old son. He will be 25 in January. Frontal lobe will be fully developed. We're excited for good decision-making, continued. And I have a daughter who is a few years younger. She turns 21 next month. So for my son, when he was a senior in high school, I told him at the beginning of the year, I'm like, good news, Nate. I've cleared my schedule. I am not going to travel as much. I'm going to spend your senior year with you. We can totally hang out together. And shockingly, he wasn't super pumped about that idea. So with Katie, I started earlier, and I remember saying to her several years ago, because I'm 53 now, and I think I was 48 at the time, and I said, you know, Bug, I want to spend more time with you before you go to college. So let's do something together. And I'm like, what if we go to yoga? And she's like, no offense, Mom, but yoga's kind of for old ladies. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, okay, shots fired, but whatever. And then she's like, I said, what if we go to Zumba together? And she's like, okay, we can do that. Good sport that she is. So we go to Zumba, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm thinking I'm fairly stunning. And she walks out of that, and she's like, that can never, ever happen again. And she's like, if you want to hang out with me, you can go to the gym with me. And she's a competitive CrossFitter. And she's also an Olympic weightlifter. So I'm like, I did what any good mom would want to do that wants to hang out with their kid. I put on a very large pair of sweatpants and a sweatshirt, and I walked into this gym, and the very first activity was jump rope. So there's my daughter, who's super fit, and she's doing double unders. And then there's me. And let's just pause for a second. And remember, I just told you I was 48 when I started, and I had already had 2 children. So you get that. So after that first exercise, the coach says, okay, anybody that needs to use the restroom before the next one, come on back. So then the next activity was pull-ups. So Katie's up there and she's doing her thing. And this guy comes up and he's like, hey, Kathleen. And he puts up this, like on that rig, he puts a big rubber band, and it was green. And he's like, put your leg in there and then you're going to pull. So I put my leg in there and there's still nothing happening. He's like, okay, you need 2 rubber bands. And so he puts a red and a green, and all of a sudden it is a miracle. Like my chin is above the bar and I'm moving. So that's over. And then the next thing is handstand push-ups on that wall. So Katie, being the jacked person that she is, she has 2 45-pound plates. She's doing deficit handstand push-ups. And this guy puts a box. And he's like, Kathleen, I want you to lay on this box like this and just move your hands like that. And I'm like, what's that little mat for by the box? And it was an abdominal mat used for sit-ups. But I'm like, why is that there? He's like, well, if you lose control of your head, I don't want you to hurt yourself. So just put your head right there. And I tell you all this because all those things that he did for me were all tier 2 supports. Well, really, they were tier 3 supports, but they were all supports that allowed me to access that experience in that gym with this group. It wasn't that I was put in a corner, and he didn't at any point say, like, Kathleen, you peed on yourself in the warm-up, you can't stay in the class. He did what was necessary to keep me engaged. And I can honestly say that, you know, through injuries and life, it's been 5 years and I'm still an active participant in that sport because of the leverage of support. So when we think about tier 2 in a CI3T model, I want you to keep in mind that when we think about that next year, think about the rubber bands, think about the boxes, think about these simple adjustments that we can make to help kids stay engaged. So it might be a self-monitoring intervention next year. And I want to use the screening data rather than teacher judgment to decide who needs what. So if I've got kids that despite my best instruction and despite the use of low intensity supports are still needing more, then think about something that is effective, like ideally from like grounded and applied behavior analysis as to what works. And then anytime I do something extra for a student, I need to know what they think about it before you start. I need to have a plan to monitor fidelity, and I got to collect information to know if it's working. And the reason I mentioned social validity, like with a self-monitoring thing, if a kid tells you this would be massively embarrassing for me, they're not going to do it. So you've got to find something that is meaningful for the kid that would work, and then have a plan for that to be concluded. And that exact same logic is going to apply at tier 3. So when I think about tier 3 supports, I'm showing you these resources from our website, Functional Assessment-Based Interventions. Where tier 3, I don't need a ton of tier 3 interventions. I just need validated ones like de-escalation plans, like functional assessment-based interventions. And when you think about next year and doing like a functional assessment-based intervention and getting an intervention in place, all the tools that you're going to need are right there for making that happen. So I'm going to ask you, if you would right now, take just a quick moment to pause before we go into our last block. And I want you to ask yourself, what do you already have in place? Do you have a plan for low intensity supports to connect those to educators in your building? Do you already have a master list? And please don't make separate lists for reading, for math, for behavior, and for social emotional learning. Put them all together, because it might be like for a reading intervention, like I might, like when a kid does need extra support for a reading intervention, I also need to know, like, do they have interfering issues for anxiety? Because if they do, that child might spend that entire group just being terrified of being called on. And in their mind, it might be things like, oh my gosh, if I go to this reading group and she calls on me and I don't know the answer, I'm going to get it wrong. And if I get it wrong, I'm going to be embarrassed. If I'm embarrassed, I'm not going to want to come back to school. And if I don't come back to school, I'm going to be a dropout. And if I'm a dropout, then I'm not going to get a job. And then I'm not going to have a place to live. And I'm not going to have a place to shower. I got to find a place. And all of a sudden they're showering in a fountain rather than just participating in the reading group. And I can have something as simple as taking away the anxiety by handing a kid 6 paper clips and saying, before we head into our reading group today, if you're face-to-face, you might say, I'm going to ask you to participate 6 times, and I promise never to call on you, but every time you participate, just move a paper clip, and when you're done, you're done. And you can give them digital paper clips for remote instruction, because then I'm removing the angst of potentially being called on, and I'm creating a floor to increase kids' opportunities to respond. So if you would, right now, take just a moment and ask yourself, what do you already have in place that you can connect to? And what do you want to learn more about? And then in that calendar invite that you just put in a couple minutes ago, will you put an action item to yourself to explore tier 2 or explore tier 3 within that tiered library? And I'm going to stop talking for just a minute to allow you time to do that. All right, thank you for playing the school game. One point of education for yourself might be learning more about like how those tools works. Like I'm seeing some really good questions about like, you know, we started screening. I felt like the teachers needed more guidance on how to do it. Go ahead and check out stuff on our website and then go look at other websites too. Look at pbis.org, look at My Blissy has a website. They have some wonderful resources, particularly one that comes to mind. Somebody was asking me about where could they go to get training on how to administer the SRSS-IE. You've got protocols on our website, you've got videos. Anna Harns and her team has put some really great information together under Steve Goodman's direction on that website. They have coaching protocols as well. So lots of rich resources. And as we think about moving forward in the COVID era, you are asking exactly the right questions, like which one should I pick? How do I install it? When I'm picking it, what do I pick that is appropriate for the culture and the values of the kids of the communities that I'm serving? Which one's reliable and valid for use? And those are they're not simple answers. And oftentimes people will put in the chat, Kathleen, just cut to the quick, tell me which screening to pick. And there isn't a one right answer. So you need to also think about like what you can sustain for the long haul, because you can't change screening tools every year. It's like you can't go from Ames Web to Dibbles. They're not interchangeable. So previous guidance that Wendy and I used to give before the COVID era was this, that, you know, build expertise before you start. So just like the questions you're asking, like help people to participate in the decision-making process of selection, go through all the procedures for how you're going to administer it and how you're going to sustain it. One of the districts that we work with, it was just so great the way they put it in place. Their district pre-populated it. So imagine like there's a folder on a secure drive. You open it up as a superintendent, and then there's a folder for every school. And then every principal is permissioned just for that. They can open theirs, and then there's a folder for each teacher. In one of the districts that we worked with, it wasn't the teacher's name. It was their employee ID number was on the outside, which I thought was genius. Their idea, not mine. Because as people get married and unmarried, that ID number never changes. And then teachers are only permissioned to go into that. And then they did the SRSS-IE, they rated it, they hit save. In Pennsylvania, they had a system built where once the teacher hit saved, the item level item information was archived, and it was just the total scores for decision making. But there's good training to teach teachers about the reliability and validity of the tools that were selected, because they have a right to know, like, is my information accurate? And, you know, how does it work? And that's why that table that we showed you that had like how fall scores predicted year-end outcomes, we have replicated that study several times at elementary, middle, and at high school. We've looked at different raters. We found out that there's no additive benefit as of right now for the second rater, like in middle and high school. So we want to screen responsibly. We want to make sure that, like, you would never email these data. These should be on a trusted drive. They should be secure. And you want to, of course, know your state and local laws. And some points that we've been weaving throughout this entire presentation is you have to please screen with caution right now, because people are saying, should we not screen? I honestly think that would be a mistake. My own opinion right now, we have a paper that's under review, and I will connect with Kelsey as soon as we get feedback from the scientific community, but it is the information we have today. And we know kids are going to come back likely with even higher levels of challenges, internalizing and externalizing. And remember, we're not using these data to label or to exclude. We're using it to see how instruction looks as a school as a whole, make decisions for strategy use for teacher, and then with other data to connect kids to support. So if you have the luxury of engaging in inquiry with your district leaders or with university partners to see how your screening tools function, great. If you're new to screening, make sure you have a plan to intervene. But we definitely want multiple sources of data. So you wouldn't use only your screening data. It's like going to the doctor's office and you take like your blood pressure. That high blood pressure could mean that you do have an underlying concern, like maybe you are at heightened risk for, you know, a stroke or something really serious, or it could just be you're really nervous about being at the doctor. It's just a screener. And then in terms of screening responsibly, and I'm seeing lots of questions come up on this, so I'd like you to please listen again to this. Some of you are going to be screening for the first time, and some of you are talking about also doing screenings completed by families, like a parent completed screener or a student completed screener. Remember, teachers are mandated reporters. If a teacher suspected that a child was a danger to themselves or others, meaning or that they could be being hurt by somebody else, that would have already been reported because that is a teacher's job to do. So screenings, when they're completed by a teacher, do not introduce any additional information that wouldn't have already been reported if needed. If you are getting input from a parent that is completing a screener or from the student themselves, you're going to get information that is new and you need to be prepared to respond to it. It wouldn't be healthy for the child or for you to get that information and shelf it. Like, we have to be able to be responsive to it. And when you think about these 3 pieces of guidance for the year ahead, I want you to think about screen, do screen, but have a plan to screen and make sure that you're prepared to respond to it. Do not use one source of information to make decisions, use multiple, but you do not need multiple screeners. And that's a point that's been misunderstood. Some people have thought, oh, I should be doing 3 screening tools and triangulating them. That's not what that means. You have one validated screener, but then you look at things like, and how are they doing in reading? And how is their attendance? That's what we're talking about for multiple sources of information. And then screen responsibly. If you're introducing new information, please be prepared to respond to it. And remember, as we go through this year together, we're going to be, thankfully, generating new resources such as what I'm showing you here. And we'll be posting this guidance as we are learning in real time with our district partners. We will be sharing new lessons learned. And we have received great feedback from people saying, you know, give us a variety of options, give us the long version, the short version. So you'll see, like on our website, there's a 3-minute version, a 23-minute version, there's an infographic. We have a 1-page research brief that just introduces a new screening tool. We just finished our 4th study, which they're featured in 2 different articles on early screening and preschool. So there's a downward extension now available for use. So go check that out. But as you're looking ahead to the year ahead, start by thinking about how are we going to create these positive, productive, safe places for kids to be welcome back to, showing empathy, knowing that we're starting with kids where they are. Check out these resources. I showed you at the very beginning, you can download those exemplars. One of our district leaders, I thought, did such a good job with it. What she did is she just took all that language that was in there. She put it in a Google Doc. She got her principal leaders to go in and make suggested edits. And from that, she used those quick points of feedback to make their district master for, like, this is what we want the consistencies to be. When you are thinking about strategies, please stay with research-based strategies. So think about, what were you already committed to teaching, like in terms of low intensity teacher-delivered supports. Wendy and Eric Common and I will be submitting a grant literally this week that's going to be building, if funded, it will be directly focused on building synchronous and asynchronous coaching models to help people install these. So we'll keep you posted on that. And there'll be a similar one working at tier 3. But think about what this could look like in person and remote technology. And initially we had talked about the possibility of, like, maybe we should just have like an entire separate blueprint for remote instruction. And it was Wendy's very clear thinking where she's like, no, that's not a good idea, because we want everything to be in one place for teachers so that if things shift, because they could, and I'm not wishing that on anybody, but if we do go back and then have to pause again, we want to make sure that things are calm, positive, and productive and clear. Because part of responding to trauma-informed care is like clear is kind. And we want to make sure that the expectations are clear, we're communicating reasonable expectations to family, and we're setting them up for success. So that's why even things like on the website about making sure stay with the same curriculum that you've been using before, we don't need to be bombarded with new information. We need to continue with what works. So as we close out today and you head into your planning time, we want to give you just a couple of different suggestions for moving forward. 1, please consider checking out these resources on the website. And here you'll find resources for families, because some of the plan is going to be involving families and teachers. And I'm getting a lot of call outs right now from family members who say, I'm not a teacher, I don't even know how to do this. So on this website, you'll find guides for like how to help families build a structure, how to build expectations. Like there's work to be done that can be without arguments, like to get kids ready to learn. Like it could be like during instruction, their phones might be charging in a charging station. You might have an expectation that kids take a quick bio break and get a snack before they sit down for instruction. I've been watching some friends of mine that are teaching at home their own children, and they're like, oh yeah, the schedule's working great. The only thing that's killing me right now is snack time, because like there's 90 million snack breaks. So they built in snack time into their schedule. So that's there. And we've even made adaptations to show like families, how do I do behavior specific praise at home? How do I do active supervision? Because remember, there's a lot of people like ourselves, a lot of us on this call, you're parenting, you're working, and you're trying to do good self-care and take care of other people that you love. So check that out. And also like look at the expectations for remote instructions that are on pbis.org in addition to those that we showed you. And when you're thinking about screening, again, last time I'm going to say it, teacher completed screenings 4 to 6 weeks after the year begins, right before winter break, and again 4 to 6 weeks later. And if you are a leader, an educational leader, pull your CI3T team together, still monthly, take temperature checks, make sure that you're putting resources back out in front of people. Like one of the things that we learned from some of our partners in our Empower calls were some families said, well, those family resources were great, but like not all my families speak English. So we're like, no problem. So we translated them into Spanish. And then some people wrote back and said, okay, those are great, but people are fatigued. They just want to watch a video. So we made little 2 to 3 minute videos. And then some people are like, could you just include a picture because we're too tired to watch a video? So you'll see some infographics. So stay tuned. And as far as the those Project Empower sessions, we do have some space still available if you're interested. And these are just like the first one is getting the school year ready. There's another one on screening. There's another on managing internalizing issues, etc. So just check those out. And these are, we also, and lastly, have monthly coaching calls. And this is like open mic time for if you want to call and drop in. And I'm thankful that Kelsey comes to many of those and she brings a couple people. So I'm sure she could come with questions for you as well. So we just want to close out this time with you by thanking you most sincerely. Wendy and I appreciate your commitment. And Kelsey, thank you again for giving us the floor and this opportunity. It's very gracious of you. And we hope we met your expectation and we look forward to connecting soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and close out the webinar. Kathleen, could you just flip a few slides ahead to the, if you lost it, that's okay. Megan,
sure, no, I can do that. You bet.
Okay. Just want to make sure people have our contact information so they know how to reach out to us. Megan put the link to the evaluation in the chat. So again, here's how you can reach out. But before I share this, just a huge thanks to you, Kathleen, and to Wendy for all the behind the scenes. We had lots of questions coming in. We still have some there. We're hoping maybe we could invite you all back or work on those questions together that we weren't able to get to, but we appreciate your time and Wendy's time and our participants, and look forward to continuing to support our Northwest region in this school year. So with that, I am going to end the webinar, and we'll probably leave it open just a little bit in case people still need some of the links to the eval or if they have any additional questions. But Kathleen and Wendy, you're free to go, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Kelsey. We appreciate it. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah.